Morning folks, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. What we're going to talk about this morning is how to make pitch sticks. And pitch is something that's made with pine. And a lot of people get confused and think that you can take pine pitch right off of the tree. You're actually taking pine sap off the tree. To create pitch, you have to add some ingredients that will make it more elastic and help it to bind. If you just use pine pitch and you heat that up, it will turn into a glass type formation that will be very brittle. If you're trying to haft anything with that, it's going to crack on you. So you need some type of binder to make it a little bit more elastic. What we're going to use today is, we need just about 5 things for this. Number one, we need an old can that we don't mind ruining. This is just an old one out of the trash. We need some pine sap. We got some good Virginia red pine sap right here. We need some charcoal, and we took that straight out of our smudge pot from yesterday. And we need a cattail, and the cattail is going to provide our pitch stick after we take the cattail off to use it for a binder in our pine sap and our pine pitch. And then the other thing that we need is a fire. We've got the fire going now. We're going to let the coals die down a little bit. And then we're going to talk about how to make pine pitch on a pitch stick. Stay with me, guys. Okay, folks, what I thought I would do first is give you kind of a close-up view of the components that we're going to use. First thing is just an old rusted can that we don't mind ruining. The second one is we've got a pretty good amount here, about a fistful of red Virginia pine sap. And it's important, if you're going to make pitch, good pitch, you really should use red pine sap and not white. White will work, but red pine sap seems to make better pitch. I don't know why. That's just my personal experience. There's no scientific evidence to that. We need some charcoal, and what I've done is I've taken the charcoal from our pot yesterday, our smudge pot yesterday, and I've put it on this slab and just begin to mash it down by rolling a half stick on it, just like this, because we want this to be as fine a dust as we can get. And then we'll add that, basically 50% of this charcoal and 50% pine sap. And then the binder or the cattail will mix in there till we get the right consistency. But the main ingredient of this is the charcoal and the pine sap. And then we'll take our cattail that we've got, and we're going to save the stick for our pitch stick. So we're going to bust this head up when the time comes to get these fluffy fibers on the inside. Let me bust some of this off so you can see it. These fluffy fibers on the inside are what we're going to use for our binder in our pine. Now this is really good fire tinder, but it's a flash tinder. You could set something like this on fire and punk it, and it would smolder for a long time. But if you set this open stuff on fire, it's going to burn very, very quickly and combust very easily because of the oils. But it's also what I would call a flash tinder. So this is what we're going to use today to make our pine pitch stick. Stay with me, folks, and we'll get right after it. Okay, now I've got this can leaning sideways on a log with the butt end of it basically down in the hot coals. And I did that on purpose. Number one, the worst thing that we could let happen is for this to catch fire. Pine sap is highly flammable. So we want to heat it up to the melting point, but we do not want it to catch fire. That will ruin our pitch. So we've got to slowly melt it down, and by having it on an angle like this, I can better see it, number one. Number two, I can better control it by stirring it around, and I don't have to get straight up over the top of my fire to do that. Then I can just move coals in there underneath it and move it around a little bit if I have to. You can see what I'm doing with this fire is I've kind of got, like I said, I don't want it to catch fire. So what I'm doing is I'm controlling that a little bit by putting fresh wood between the open flame and the container. I'm just continually feeding the coals. So as that wood burns on the bottom, it's creating more coals. And if flames start to creep up onto the container, then I'm going to move and put some more stuff on top of it to knock those flames back down beside the container. I just want the coals heating the container, not the flames. Now as this is melting down, if I find any big chunks of bark, like this one, I'm going to pull those out. And that's a really good fire starter, so I really don't want to get rid of that because that's a great coal extender, flame extender for my fire. So I'm just going to set it off to the side and save that for a later resource because it's covered in pitch, or pine I mean. It's covered in pine sap, excuse me. And this stuff's starting to melt down good now. It's also starting to get really hot, and I got to be careful of that. So I'm kind of going to roll it away from the flame a little bit, maybe move this over just a little bit, roll it away, scoop my fire out away from it a little bit, just let the coals work on it here. I've got a chunk in there, and I'm not sure if it's bark or if it's just a chunk of pine sap that hasn't melted yet. And I'm kind of playing with here. Right there, you can see a pretty good chunk right there. Alright, so now that I've got that stuff melted down to the point I want it, I'm going to add my charcoal. And what I'll do is just grab a big oak leaf like this and just kind of funnel it in. And I'll put about 3/4 of it in there, or half. Set the oak leaf aside and use the stick that I've been messing with here just to stir that in real good. And remember, the longer this sits here, the cooler this is going to get. So we're going to have to get it back on the heat pretty quick to keep it from getting hard again. But as long as it's nice and pliable, we're just going to keep stirring this in. Okay. And we still got plenty of heat here because we're still bubbling, but we're not boiling. That's what we want. And again, we're just continuing to stir this charcoal in as it heats up. And you can see I got some flames down here off to the side over here. I'm going to want to get those out of there because I don't want to take a chance on this boiling. So I'll just come in the side here and scoop that out and then move the coals back in to keep it warm. I'm not adding any fresh wood to this fire at this point. I'm just using the coals that I have. Okay, once I get to this point where I have heated up the mixture with the charcoal in there mixed in, and I've got the consistency that I want, before I add more charcoal, I'm going to put some binder in there to thicken it up and see how it looks. And I'm going to use the cattail for that. And I'm going to bring that over, and all we're going to do really is just bust up that head just like this. Bust it up real good and drop it down inside. And this is just kind of a, how much it takes is kind of what it looks like as far as cattail goes. This stuff swells up pretty good, so you're not going to need a ton of this, but it's a consistency thing. So you're just going to have to kind of watch it as you go. You don't want any stems in there like that at all. And then just continue to stir that mixture. And this is the reason I'm using a different stick to stir this than I'm going to use for a pitch stick, because you're going to get these, you're going to get this cattail all over it. It's going to look like somebody got tarred and feathered. Now we'll just keep an eye on this consistency and see how it comes out. And we can always take a stick and put it in there and pull some out and let it dry on the stick. It's almost like making a candle. You're just going to put the stick in, pull it out, let it dry on the stick, put it back in, pull it out, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go along, just like a candle would if you were dipping that candle wick into hot wax and pulling it out. Okay, now at this point I've actually got my cattail stick. I've carved that cattail head off of it, and I'm using it because it's a green stick. And now I'm just going to kind of move this away from the fire a little bit so it cools down a bit. Roll some on the stick and look at the consistency of it. And if it looks right to me, if it looks liquid and not too chunky, then I'm ready to go. If it's got too much chunkiness in it, then I may need to put a little bit more pine sap in there. But for right now, I just want to pull it off the heat and see what I'm getting. Okay, I'm almost getting what I want now. I've got this stuff to where it's getting cooled down enough now to where I put my stick in there and start turning it, and it's almost like a stringy paste. See how that's all stringy like that with them cattail fibers in there? That's going to be the binder, and that's what I want. When I get it to that point, that's when I'm going to start making my pitch sticks. Just getting this stuff on a stick letting it dry, sticking it back in for another ride. And at this point you can kind of push that stuff on there with your hand like this. And kind of pack it down because it's not going to be real overly hot. And we'll let that dry a little bit. And then we'll get some more on the stick. Now once you've got your pitch, the amount of pitch you want on your stick, then you can just kind of form it with your hand like I said every time. And then to make it look nice, you can just kind of put it over an open flame for a minute and kind of glaze it over. Don't let it catch fire because it is flammable. Just glaze the stick over and let it cool down. And when you're done, you'll have a pretty nice looking pitch stick. You can put that in your backpack, make a couple more if you got more pine sap or to make pine pitch with, or if you've got more pine pitch left in your can. I don't like them much bigger than this, and you're just going to melt it a little bit at a time to use it for glue and hafting. So you'll just put it to a heated flame just like this, like I'm doing to glaze it, except at that point you'll actually take part of it off and use that for your adhesive by scraping it onto whatever object you're trying to glue. It is also highly flammable, so it's also a good time extender for your flame if you've got marginal tinder for an emergency. Okay folks, well here's our finished pitch stick, and a good test for yourself with a pitch stick is let it get good and dry, give it a half an hour until it's nice and solid, and then smack it on some wood. If it doesn't break or fracture or crack, then you probably did it right. If it breaks or fractures, then you've made it too hard. You don't have enough binder in there, or you don't have enough charcoal in there, and you've made it too glassy. You've just heated up too much pine resin and it's turned to almost like a glass state where it's going to fracture and break. That's not what you want for pitch. You want it to be a little bit elastic so that you can use it for hafting as well as all the other uses for pitch. You can use this to bind things with, you can use it to repair things with. It's one of the best natural super glues there is. It's easy to make, but it does take time. Just like any other primitive or bushcraft skill, old-time skill of any kind, it takes patience, it takes practice, and it takes dirt time to learn how to do it right. I appreciate your views, I appreciate your support, I appreciate everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, for all my friends, affiliates, sponsors, and instructors. I'll be back with another video in this series as soon as I can.